In the vast, star-strewn landscape of the Imperium, there are planets spoken of in whispers. Planets whose names stir fear, awe, or reverence. Arrakis is one of them, the cradle of spice, of jihad, and of destiny. But there is another world, far from the deserts, far from mysticism, where the myth of progress collides headfirst with the most sacred taboos of mankind. That planet is Nine. Sleek, cold, and mechanically alive, Nine is unlike any other planet in the known universe. Its surface is desolate, its cities buried deep underground, massive complexes of humming machinery, sentient factories, and ceaseless invention. It is a world where thinking machines walk a razor's edge of legality, where forbidden technology is crafted in the dark, and where human ambition often stretches too far. Yet, beneath the humming of generators and the gleam of precision tools, Nine is also a planet of paradox. It claims loyalty to the Great Convention, but pushes the limits of what it means to be human-made. It preaches loyalty to the Emperor, but opens its doors to secret dealings with the Tleilaxu. It profits from stability, but breeds the seeds of rebellion. This video is not just about a planet. It's about the idea of progress in a universe built on fear. It's about the cost of innovation, the politics of technology, and the secret wars waged not with armies, but with tools, code, and engineered life. To understand Nine is to peer into a mirror, one that reflects not only the Dune universe, but our own world's struggle with control, transgression, and the machines we create. Let's descend into the tunnels of Ix. Let's uncover the story of a world that may have gone too far. Long before Nine became synonymous with forbidden innovation, it was a planet with no special name, no grand destiny, a cold, remote orb in the Albion system, distant from the centers of power. But in a universe dominated by guild monopolies and noble houses, no planet remains forgotten for long. Nine's transformation from obscurity to infamy begins with the same catalyst that fuels all progress: need. In the earliest centuries of space expansion, far before the Corrino Empire, before the Guild, before the Great Convention, settlers from the League of Nobles identified the Albion system for its mineral richness. Beneath its sterile crust lay a treasure trove of rare metals, energy sources, and crystalline circuits ripe for exploitation. But the surface of Nine was inhospitable, frigid, without flora or fauna, and exposed to violent solar winds. Colonization efforts failed, until the settlers looked beneath. Unlike other planets, Nine was hollowed out by natural caverns and tectonic rifts, offering an enormous subterranean expanse that could be sealed, pressurized, and tamed. This made it the ideal location for early industrial colonization. No sunlight, no matter. Nine could feed off geothermal energy. No biosphere, it would import what it needed. The foundations of the first underground cities were laid during this period, not as places of culture or spirituality, but as enormous factories and labs. These early Ixians were not inventors. They were engineers, miners, logicians, and machinists. Their society evolved quickly into something unique, not built around religion or war, but around the optimization of production. Generations passed, and the cultural DNA of the planet began to shift. On Nine, value was found not in lineage or faith, but in efficiency and results. It is here that Nine's name is first spoken, not as a title of nobility or a poetic label, but as a cold designation. Planet Nine, the ninth planet of the Albion system. The number was meant to catalog it. The Ixians, however, adopted it with pride, a name that suited their utilitarian philosophy. While other human worlds developed religions, folklore, and warrior traditions, Nine turned inward, deeper into its mineral veins and computational networks. By the time of the Butlerian Jihad, it had become a place of eerie silence and silent productivity, a whisper in the records of the League of Nobles. But even then, the seeds of rebellion were already growing. The dependence on machinery, the obsession with productivity, and the emergence of pre-AI analytical systems would soon put Ix at odds with the future defenders of humanity's soul. To understand the soul of Nine, one must begin by abandoning the concept of soul entirely. This is a planet where tradition bends before progress, where culture is not painted in myths or stories, but etched into the circuitry of machines and the logic of efficiency. On Nine, the guiding principle is not faith, not honor, but output. If a policy, a system, a human being, even an ethical concern, stands in the way of innovation, it is either modified or discarded. The cultural architecture of Nine is not built on temples or monuments. Instead, it lives in the structures of technocracy. Vast data centers, archive towers, research platforms suspended over molten veins of energy. Their cities, dug into planetary crust, function more like integrated organisms than settlements. Housing, manufacturing, testing labs, and bureaucratic chambers are all interconnected, modular, automated, and under continuous optimization. From an early age, Ixian children are tested not for creativity or courage, but for technical aptitude, logic comprehension, and data processing potential. Education is not a means to self-discovery, but a precision tool used to assign each child to their most productive role. The goal is to feed the system, to become another efficient cog in the great machine that is Nine. Their societal hierarchy reflects this obsession with function. At the top of the pyramid is the Tleilaxu-backed ruling technocracy, headed by powerful houses like House Vernius, at least until political disasters struck. Below them, project directors, system strategists, and infrastructure architects, roles that sound more like corporate titles than noble ranks. Nobility on Ix is tied not to bloodlines but to intellectual contribution. Status is earned by the design of a system that reduces latency by 0.1%, or by the architecture of a machine capable of operating in near-sapient decision trees. Religion, in the classical sense, has long been absent from the Ixian mindset. Instead, technology is faith. Progress is sacred. The divine lies in the hum of power conduits and the perfection of machine logic. This creates a chilling effect on philosophical dissent. Critics of technocracy are not imprisoned or executed. They are reassigned, retrained, or quietly made obsolete. Their thoughts are not considered heretical, merely inefficient. Despite this cold exterior, Ix is not without ideology. Their ideology is post-human. The perfection of the machine is seen as the perfection of civilization. They do not advocate for AI, officially, but they relentlessly pursue systems that approximate sentience without crossing the line. Their devices are not called thinking machines, but hybrid semi-sapients, predictive engines, or analytical cores. Language becomes the legal shield behind which they hide, pushing the limits of the great convention. Government on Ix is rarely visible in the traditional sense. The Central Governance Council, headquartered deep within the core administrative node, operates almost entirely through automated policy execution, with human oversight kept to a strategic minimum. Decision-making flows through algorithms. Citizens file petitions through interfaces. Legal judgments are rendered by weighted logic chains and code-based interpretation of convention law. It is not that humans are unimportant on Nine, rather, they are optimized. Each role, each movement, each life is calculated. There's no need for open control when every aspect of society has been designed to function without resistance. Compliance isn't enforced, it's embedded. What emerges is not a tyranny, nor a democracy. It is something entirely alien, a society where culture is code and governance is a perfectly tuned feedback loop. But beneath that cold surface, something trembles, because even in the most efficient machine, entropy waits. If Arrakis is the heart of mysticism and prophecy, Nine is the cold mind of the Imperium, a mind forever calculating, designing, improving. The planet's obsession with technology is not born from curiosity alone. It is strategic, competitive, and above all, profitable. But on Nine, technological progress is not just a race against limitations. It is a dance with the edge of illegality. In the post-Butlerian universe, the production of any machine that mimics the human mind is forbidden. The Orange Catholic Bible proclaims it with divine finality. Thou shalt not make a machine in the likeness of a human mind. It is a law, a religion, and a trauma all in one. Most societies within the Imperium fear this line and respect it. 9 flirts with it constantly, unlike the Bene Tleilaxu, who genetically twist flesh into new forms, or the Bene Gesserit, who manipulate bloodlines and consciousness. The Ixians operate with gears, energy, and data. Their domain is the mechanical and the computational. What they build is not life, at least not in the traditional sense. But many of their creations come eerily close to it. Among their most prized innovations are predictive computational engines capable of processing data patterns at such speed and complexity that they seem prophetic. These machines are not technically thinking, at least not under the legal definitions enforced by the Great Convention. But their ability to anticipate behavior makes them dangerously powerful, and dangerously attractive to many factions. The Spacing Guild, for instance, has always relied on spice and prescient navigators to chart safe passage through fold space. But Ixian engineers offer an alternative: navigation systems built on complex simulations and probabilistic modeling. While never fully replacing prescience, these devices allow lesser navigators, or even non-guild actors, to plot short-range travel. A direct threat to the guild's monopoly. And then there are the infamous no-chambers and no-ships. These constructs, perfected on 9, create pockets of invisibility in time and space, rendering their contents undetectable to even the most potent prescient minds. Neither Paul Atreides nor Leto II could see inside a no-chamber. The implications are staggering. In a universe ruled by oracles and visions, to be unseen is to be free, or to plot in absolute secrecy. But the most disturbing of Ixian advancements are the semi-sentient servant units, commonly disguised as interface systems or automation clusters. These devices blur the line between assistant and mind. While never officially declared as artificial intelligence, some of these systems exhibit learning capabilities, problem-solving skills, and even rudimentary emotional simulations. Not enough to trigger condemnation, but enough to raise eyebrows across the Landsraad. To the outside world, 9 insists on its innocence. Its designs are advanced tools, its engineers patriotic innovators, and its ethics fully aligned with convention law. Yet more than once, agents of the Bene Gesserit, the Guild, or even the Emperor himself have attempted covert inspections of Ixian facilities, only to return with heavily redacted reports or not at all. What keeps 9 alive, what prevents its annihilation, is the sheer utility of its inventions. The devices that 9 produces are too useful, too advanced, too valuable. Even those who despise 9 find themselves purchasing its technology in secret. The hypocrisy is universal. There is genius on Ix, but it walks hand in hand with heresy, and the line between the two is getting thinner. The shadow of the Butlerian Jihad looms over every piece of technology in the Imperium. It was not just a war, it was a psychological rupture. The machines rose, they enslaved, and humanity fought back nearly to extinction. The trauma was so great, so deeply etched into the collective memory of the species, that it birthed a new order. No more thinking machines. Not now. Not ever. For most of the Imperium, this edict is sacred. The Great Convention enforces it. The Orange Catholic Bible sanctifies it. To build a machine in the likeness of a human mind is more than a crime. It is blasphemy. On many worlds, even the presence of advanced calculators or data systems triggers suspicion. Entire religions have formed around the purity of unaugmented human thought. But 9 exists in defiance of this fear. Not openly, not arrogantly, but persistently. To the Ixians, the Butlerian Taboo is not a moral law. It is a technical challenge. A boundary to be studied, probed, and, if possible, circumvented through semantics, proxies, and legal interpretations. The engineers of 9 have learned to speak in the language of plausible deniability. Their machines are adaptive, not intelligent. Their algorithms are evolving, not thinking. Their devices are assistive, not autonomous. Every innovation is carefully named, framed, and legally documented to avoid tripping the alarm bells of the religious and political watchdogs. But even behind these layers of terminology, the truth is clear to those who dare to look. 9 is pushing against the boundary of forbidden knowledge. Not because they seek to resurrect the past, but because they believe that true progress lies just beyond the edge of fear. The conflict is not only cultural, it is existential. Ix represents the return of the machine not as conqueror, but as partner. Where others see trauma, Ix sees opportunity. The Butlerian Jihad was, in their eyes, not the end of machine intelligence, but the beginning of a new phase of careful control and calculated use. This attitude brings 9 into subtle and sometimes direct conflict with groups like the Butlerian purists, who still exist in the fringes of the Imperium. It also alarms the Bene Gesserit, who remember too well the cost of over-reliance on artificial thinking. Even the Spacing Guild, itself reliant on non-computerized navigation, views 9's trajectory with unease. Yet none of these factions have managed to stop Ix. Why? Because Ixian machines work. They solve problems no one else can. They automate processes that save lives, win wars, and protect imperial interests. Nobles who denounce 9 in public often have hidden compartments filled with their devices. Entire sectors of CHOAM trade rely on Ixian logistics programs. Even the Corrino emperors have accepted non-sentient monitoring systems produced by 9, while quietly increasing surveillance on the planet itself. The irony is bitter. The taboo that was meant to protect humanity now acts as a veil behind which 9 quietly reconstructs the forbidden. And 9 is not alone. As we'll soon see, they are not the only ones who play with fire. The Bene Tleilaxu, masters of flesh and genetic transgression, have begun to collaborate with 9 in ways that threaten the very foundation of the Great Convention. But for 9, the Butlerian Taboo is not an obstacle. It is a riddle, and they are very, very close to solving it. On the surface, 9 and the Bene Tleilaxu appear to be antithetical forces. One builds its future in steel, circuits, and logic, the other in flesh, genes, and secrecy. One engineers with data, the other with blood. The Ixians hide behind the veil of legal definitions and corporate diplomacy. The Tleilaxu cloak themselves in religious fanaticism, closed societies, and biological alchemy. But beneath these opposing exteriors lies a common truth. Both civilizations seek control over the fabric of reality, and both are willing to transgress in silence to get it. Their connection is not ideological. It is practical. It is transactional. And it is extremely dangerous. The first recorded collaborations between Ix and the Tleilaxu emerged in the shadows of the Great Convention's loopholes. While the convention forbade the creation of thinking machines, it said little about organic computers, and even less about blended systems. The Tleilaxu, long experts in flesh modification and the creation of biological entities like golas, had encountered limits in how far DNA alone could be pushed. Meanwhile, the Ixians had reached computational ceilings in certain problem-solving systems that required intuition rather than logic. A deal was inevitable. In secret labs, hidden deep within the unregulated sectors of the Imperium, or perhaps aboard no-ships beyond the reach of prescient eyes, the two began hybrid experiments. Machines with organic neural cores, golas enhanced with Ixian implants, artificial matrices powered by both flesh and code. Devices that could pass as either machine or organism depending on who was asking. One such project, rumored in obscure Mentat reports and whispered about in Bene Gesserit circles, involved the attempted creation of a synthetic Kwisatz Haderach, a mind capable of near prescience, grown in a Tleilaxu axolotl tank but guided by Ixian predictive computation. The project failed, or so it said, but failure never stopped either faction. The real danger of this alliance lies not in any single invention, but in its philosophical implications. Both 9 and the Tleilaxu treat the human form not as sacred, but as modular. To them, identity is a function. Consciousness is a pattern. A body is hardware. If it can be taken apart, it can be rebuilt and improved. What emerges from this ideology is a quiet, shared vision of the future. One where the human-machine divide no longer exists, where the body and code merge, and where God, if such a being exists, is just the ultimate programmer. Naturally, this kind of thinking horrifies the rest of the Imperium. The Bene Gesserit, who value bloodlines and consciousness, view this hybrid science as a threat to their genetic order. The Guild navigators, already slipping into irrelevance thanks to Ixian NAV devices, fear the emergence of beings who could traverse space and time without spice. Even Leto II, the God Emperor himself, tolerates the 9 Tleilaxu link only because it fits his golden path. But he watches them carefully, for their ambitions mirror his own in chilling ways. And the irony is that the Ixians and the Tleilaxu do not trust each other. They share data, trade prototypes, and collaborate when interests align. But at every turn, they prepare to betray, to compete, or to absorb the other's secrets. Each believes it will outlast and dominate the other. In the end, this uneasy alliance is not a friendship. It is a slow arms race fought in shadows, a battle to reshape the future of mankind one forbidden experiment at a time. And no one knows just how far they've already gone. To speak of Ixian devices is to enter a realm where utility becomes indistinguishable from philosophy, and where the distinction between tool and intelligence grows dangerously thin. These machines are not simple tools, not passive instruments that serve their master. They are constructs so complex, so responsive, and so secretive in design that even those who use them often do not fully understand them. The most infamous of these devices, and perhaps the most transformative, is the Ixian navigation system. In a universe where full space travel is only made possible by spice-fueled prescience, the idea that technology might replace the Guild's navigators is not only subversive, it's revolutionary and terrifying. The Ixians developed a class of high-efficiency simulation engines, capable of mapping potential futures not through psychic vision, but through raw data. By feeding these engines with enormous amounts of environmental, sociological, and statistical inputs, the machines could produce probabilistic forecasts so accurate that they began to mimic prescient insight. These were not true oracles, but they were close enough to challenge the monopoly of those who were. And it didn't stop there. The No-Chambers and No-Ships are perhaps the most iconic Ixian contributions to galactic technology. These constructs are designed to hide objects, people, or entire vessels from prescient sight. Not even the God Emperor Leto II, whose awareness stretched across past and future, could see into a no-ship. The implications of such invisibility are staggering. Espionage, political maneuvering, secret movements of armies, all hidden from the eyes of those who once claimed to see everything. No-Chambers are smaller cousins of no-ships, often used to shield individuals or objects. They are favored by rebels, spies, and factions who wish to remain unseen by the powers that rely on prescience. In a universe where seeing is power, to be hidden is rebellion. Another class of Ixian device rarely spoken of in public are the mind interfaces, systems that respond to emotive, neural, or even subconscious input, allowing users to think commands rather than speak or type them. These interfaces can learn from their user over time, adapting to preferences, predicting choices, offering suggestions. Again, not technically a thinking machine, but how close must a tool come before the line is crossed? Some of the most elite nobles of the Landsraad, and even members of the Spacing Guild itself, have commissioned custom Ixian interfaces tailored to their biology and cognition. These machines become extensions of the user's mind, and in some cases, begin to shape the user's thinking as well. It's no longer clear who commands whom. There are rumors, never confirmed, always denied, of Ixian oracular engines. Machines capable of storing and cross-referencing historical data so deeply that they can simulate likely timelines. Such devices, if real, could rival the power of mentats and prescients alike. If these exist, they are hidden in the deepest vaults of the planet, or perhaps aboard a no-ship drifting silently through the stars, waiting. Each Ixian device is a masterpiece of plausible legality. Their creators are lawyers as much as they are engineers. Every invention is carefully documented to comply with convention law, even when it bends that law to its breaking point. Yet the buyers don't care. Whether it's CHOAM executives optimizing planetary production, nobles seeking secret counsel, or the Bene Gesserit enhancing their breeding programs, everyone wants what IX can provide. Everyone needs the edge. But every transaction tightens the noose. Because as these devices spread, so does Ixian influence. The more the Imperium relies on these machines, the more power Nine gains, not through armies or faith, but through dependency. The machines of IX do not march. They wait. And when the time is right, they decide. To understand the rise and peril of Nine, one must study its position not only as a technological powerhouse, but as a political pawn. For all its genius and clandestine developments, Nine exists within a volatile web of imperial law, noble rivalries, and economic manipulation. And nowhere is this tension more visible than in its relationship with the Corrino Empire, and later with the House Atreides. Under the rule of House Corrino, the galaxy operated under a finely tuned balance of terror. The Padishah emperors ruled with the backing of the Sardaukar, and ensured that no single house rose too far. But despite this rigid hierarchy, CHOAM shares and economic influence were often more decisive than military force. Nine, with its invaluable devices and deep corporate tentacles, held massive sway within CHOAM, rivaling even the great houses in financial power. This economic power bred suspicion and enemies. Although officially a neutral industrial world, House Vernius of Nine held noble status and maintained close ties with many Landsraad factions. But the Emperor grew wary. The Sardaukar feared that Nine's private armies and machine intelligences, veiled though they were, might someday challenge their supremacy. The invasion of IX by House Vernius, supported by the Sardaukar and blessed by Shaddam Corrino for himself, marked a pivotal betrayal. The fall of House Vernius was a calculated move. Ostensibly, it was about rooting out illegal machine activity. In truth, it was about crushing economic independence. The annexation was brutal. The factories were seized. The ruling family went into exile. The Tleilaxu were called in as consultants, a clear sign that experimentation would continue, but under new management. During this dark period, Prince Herbert Vernius, crippled and exiled, found refuge with House Atreides on Caladan. There, under Duke Leto's protection, he was reconstructed using Ixian cybernetic implants, the same technologies that had been condemned. The irony was sharp and the political signal clear. The Atreides supported Ixian science, even when it meant skirting the edge of taboo. Leto Atreides, pragmatic yet principled, saw in Nine a future worth preserving, though he never embraced its extremism. He supported Herbert, and later backed covert missions to restore House Vernius. Eventually, Nine was reclaimed, though forever changed. The wounds of occupation left scars, both political and philosophical. The planet emerged more paranoid, more secretive, and more determined to remain beyond the reach of imperial interference. When Paul Atreides rose to the throne as emperor, the dynamics shifted dramatically. Paul, as Muad'Dib, was no friend to the old order. His Freeman Jihad reshaped the universe, toppling the Corrino dynasty and placing Arrakis and the throne in Atreides' hands. During this time, Nine's role became even more complex. On one hand, they benefited from the new empire's need for advanced technology, especially in warfare and administration. On the other, Paul's own prescient power posed a threat to the secrecy that Nine had always depended on. But Paul had other concerns. A galaxy ablaze with holy war, political unrest, and religious upheaval. For a time, Nine was left alone, free to resume its experiments, to court the Guild, the Tleilaxu, even CHOAM, all under the radar of a distracted empire. This semi-autonomy emboldened Nine. It was during this era that many of their most dangerous projects began, including early iterations of oracular machines, stealth ships, and enhanced biocomputational devices. These creations would later play a pivotal role during the reign of Leto II, Paul's son, and the God Emperor of Dune. But that, too, would come at a cost. Because while Nine thrived in the cracks of empire, it also forgot one essential truth. The more powerful your tools become, the more indispensable you are, and the more dangerous you seem. And when a being like Leto II emerges, with prescient vision that spans millennia, nothing and no one escapes scrutiny. The fall of House Vernius was not just a political event, it was an ideological rupture. For centuries, Ixian technocracy had maintained a delicate balance between innovation and legality, secrecy and survival. But when House Vernius, a rival technological power, aligned with the Sardaukar to invade and annex Ix, that balance shattered. On the surface, the justification was framed in the language of compliance. Nine had grown too bold, too careless with its machines, too comfortable in the gray zone of the Butlerian laws. Behind closed doors, however, the motives were far more insidious. CHOAM board members, Corrino loyalists, and technophobic houses all saw an opportunity to dismantle a rival and redistribute its assets. Vernius, long jealous of Nine's supremacy, was more than willing to be the puppet sword. Their own technological expertise was respected, but limited to safer fields. Materials engineering, optical devices, precision instruments. They lacked Nine's boldness and vision. Yet, with the blessing of Shaddam Corrino IV, they led the charge, entering Nine's underground cities not as liberators, but as reclaimers of orthodoxy. The occupation was brutal and systematic. Ixian data cores were seized. Research staff were either re-educated or vanished into black site facilities. No ships under construction were disassembled, and the parts taken to unknown locations. The entire core technocracy, the nerve center of Nine's machine governance, was disbanded. In its place, Ixian administrators and imperial compliance officers established puppet control. And then came the Tleilaxu. Their arrival was subtle, masked as technical advisors invited to assist in the evaluation of biomechanical systems found during the purge. But within months, they had seized whole sectors of Ixian infrastructure. Where Nine built machines to think, the Tleilaxu bred organs to calculate. They installed living data clusters, neural sponges, and organic memory coils into previously mechanical frameworks. The results were hybrid monstrosities, neither flesh nor circuit, but something in between. The Ixians who remained in secret, technocrats hiding deep within abandoned factory zones, watched in horror. Their planet, once a cathedral of cold logic, was becoming a playground for biological corruption. Devices began to exhibit erratic behavior, responding not to commands but to emotional input. Systems once governed by pure algorithms now pulsed with living tissue, growing and adapting without oversight. It was no longer Nine, it was something else. Even the Ixians lost control. They had underestimated the Tleilaxu's hunger for experimentation and their religious fervor for genetic supremacy. What was intended as a political conquest turned into a scientific infestation. The invaders could not hold what they had taken. Outside the planet, whispers began to spread. Nobles who had once celebrated the fall of House Vernius now feared what Nine was becoming. If the Tleilaxu could weaponize Ixian tools with biological unpredictability, who could stop them? Enter the exiled remnants of House Vernius. Prince Romber, reconstructed and rearmed with Atreid's backing, began to rally support from sympathetic factions. Using no-ship corridors, hidden networks, and old contacts within CHOAM, he orchestrated a counteroffensive, not just with weapons but with data. Leaks of Tleilaxu abominations horrified the public. Even the Bene Gesserit raised their voices in alarm. Eventually, with the shifting tides of power brought on by Paul Atreid's rebellion and Shaddam's weakening grasp, Nine was reclaimed. The Vernius were expelled. The Tleilaxu, never fully rooted, retreated, but not before seeding dozens of biotechnological viruses and leaving behind encrypted organic systems whose full purpose is still unknown. The crisis changed Nine forever. No longer naive about the political cost of innovation, the Ixians became more secretive, more paranoid, more refined in their public messaging. Their technocracy returned, but now with layers of redundancy, deniability, and obfuscation. They had survived a violation not only of sovereignty but of identity. And in the shadows, some wondered, Did the Tleilaxu leave behind only machinery, or something that still thinks? When Leto II Atreides, son of Paul Muad'Dib, took the throne, he did not simply rule the Imperium. He rewrote its future. His reign, which would last over 3.5 millennia, was unlike anything the galaxy had ever known. A being part human, part sandworm, and fully prescient, Leto II didn't need armies to crush his enemies. He could see every possible outcome, every betrayal, every lie, before it happened. And in this terrifying regime of omnipresent foresight, one ally became essential: Ix. But this alliance was not built on friendship. It was built on necessity and control. Leto II understood that the very tools Ix created could be used against him. No ships that could hide minds. Predictive engines that mimicked prescience. Interfaces that could manipulate perception. He also knew that the Ixians, if left unchecked, would eventually create something capable of threatening his golden path. So he made them part of the machine. Rather than destroy Ix, a feat entirely within his power, Leto folded them into his empire, offering them protection, autonomy, and resources in exchange for obedience. This was not an equal partnership. Ix became a tool of tyranny, their innovations bent toward Leto's long-term plan of breaking humanity's addiction to centralized control and predictable systems. He allowed Nine to continue its experimentation, even encouraged it, but only under his supervision. In this controlled environment, some of the most advanced technologies in human history were produced. No chambers, now refined, were used to cloak dissidents or to test humanity's readiness for chaos. Cognitive interfaces were developed that could simulate political outcomes across star systems. Monitoring systems capable of mapping not only behavior but intention were deployed. And yet, the Ixians never saw the full picture. To them, it seemed as though they had been granted an age of prosperity. Leto had legitimized their devices. He tolerated their hybrid experiments. They had funding, imperial contracts, and global demand. But what they did not understand, could not understand, was that every invention they produced was being manipulated, nudged subtly by the God Emperor's vision. Every line of code, every industrial protocol, every research initiative existed because Leto allowed it, because it played into the golden path. He was not merely using their machines. He was using them to train humanity. By allowing Nine to flourish in tightly defined parameters, Leto cultivated a species that would, in time, learn to function without the crutches of prescience, without centralized religion, without dependency on any single form of control. Ix was his laboratory, not of machines but of resistance. And there were moments of rebellion. Certain technocrats, emboldened by their technological power, sought to escape Leto's grasp. They whispered of building devices to block his vision, of constructing autonomous constructs that could act beyond even his perception. But he saw them all, and those plans ended before they began. Still, Leto allowed small dissents to grow, controlled, measured, like introducing a virus into a system just to watch how the host adapts. It wasn't cruelty. It was evolution. Perhaps the most symbolic moment of this era was the creation and concealment of no ships so advanced that even Leto himself claimed he could not fully perceive them. Whether this was true or part of his plan remains debated. What matters is that these ships would one day become the vessels of the scattering, the great exodus that followed Leto's death, carrying the seeds of rebellion, chaos, and eventual freedom. Nine was instrumental to that legacy, and though they never saw themselves as rebels, their machines became the vectors of change. Under Leto's control, Nine had reached heights no other world could dream of, only to discover, centuries later, that their greatness had always been someone else's design. Leto II used Nine not only as a manufacturer. He used them as a mirror, and when the tyrant finally died, and the galaxy shattered in his absence, it would be Ixian technology that carried humanity forward, into uncertainty, into freedom, into danger. When the God Emperor Leto II was assassinated, the galaxy did not return to balance, it erupted. His death marked the collapse of the longest continuous regime in human history, and with it, the end of enforced stability. The centuries of peace under the Golden Path fractured into chaos, exploration, and a massive exodus known simply as the Scattering. Millions left the known universe, fleeing the vacuum of Leto's absence and the terror of unpredictability. Entire populations vanished into uncharted space, forming new cultures, new religions, and new technologies. Most of them forgotten, some of them destined to return. Among these were factions born from Nine. Though the original planet remained, a powerful segment of Ixian technocrats, fearing retaliation or simply drawn to the promise of unregulated experimentation, took their ships and their forbidden knowledge into the unknown. From this migration would emerge a new force. The Neo-Ixians. The Neo-Ixians were not merely exiles or explorers. They were the evolution of the Ixian ethos, no longer restrained by the Great Convention, no longer monitored by prescience, and entirely beyond the reach of the crumbling Imperium. In the dark recesses of space, they abandoned caution and pushed technology beyond any previous limit. Rumors tell of vast artificial worlds, constructed atom by atom, self-aware cities that govern themselves. Conscious software, no longer pretending to obey laws it was built to circumvent. The Neo-Ixians believed that the human-machine boundary was obsolete. To them, the lessons of the Butlerian Jihad were not to be feared but surpassed. And yet, they did not return alone. Centuries later, as the forces of the Scattering began to trickle back into the known universe, the Neo-Ixians returned too. No longer the technocrats of the past, but something new, something alien in purpose and terrifying in capacity. They arrived with ships that defied all known scanning protocols, piloted by cybernetic beings whose thoughts could not be tracked by mentats or sensed by the Bene Gesserit. Their AI-like constructs did not speak, but simply transmitted encrypted command chains to their surroundings, as though the vessels themselves were thinking. And perhaps they were. The Ixians who remained. The traditionalists on the homeworld viewed these newcomers with awe and suspicion. While both shared technological roots, the Neo-Ixians had evolved beyond legality, beyond even Nine's taste for dangerous advancement. They were no longer part of a human future. They were a post-human trajectory, birthed in silence, grown in exile, and now returned with unknown motives. Some saw salvation in them, others saw extinction. The Neo-Ixians claimed to offer freedom from mortality, freedom from history, even freedom from identity. They presented devices that could upload human cognition, reproduce memories, simulate entire personalities. They offered to replace mentats with logic cores, to cure death with memory loops, and to redefine sentience. The Bene Gesserit, already weakened and fragmented by the events of the Scattering, saw in the Neo-Ixians a new form of enemy. One not bound by flesh, not tempted by religion, and not intimidated by legacy. These were creators without conscience, engineers of fate, and descendants of Ixian arrogance now fully matured. And yet, not all Neo-Ixians were unified. As often happens in isolation, their ideology had fractured. Some factions believed in full integration, the absorption of humanity into machine ecologies. Others believed in dominance, that the machine should guide, not merge. Still others sought only knowledge, having abandoned all allegiance to any moral code or societal system. This disunity would become critical in the conflicts to come. As wars ignited in the wake of Leto's death, and as the honored Matries began their savage return, the Neo-Ixians entered the galactic stage, not as a monolith but as a collection of unpredictable forces. They provided weapons, ships, and intelligence to multiple sides. Some fought alongside the Bene Gesserit, others supported the Matries. And some simply watched, gathering data for purposes no one could decipher. But one thing was clear. The legacy of Nine, once hidden in laboratories beneath the crust of a dead planet, had now exploded outward, scattering into hundreds of forms, each more alien and more dangerous than the last. Nine had never intended to change the human race, but through the Neo-Ixians it already had. Throughout the history of the Imperium, The most sacred taboo has remained unchanged. Never create a machine in the likeness of the human mind. It is more than a law. It is an echo of trauma, the bitter legacy of the Butlerian Jihad, when humanity had to claw back its freedom from the cold grip of thinking machines. But 9 and its Neo-Ixian offspring force us to confront a question that has haunted humanity for millennia, both in the Dune universe and in our own. What if progress inevitably leads us back to that forbidden edge? The Ixians never claimed to build artificial intelligence. They used euphemisms, predictive engines, adaptive algorithms, heuristic clusters. They wrote legal frameworks so intricate that no one could quite prove that their creations thought. But even in the early days, their devices made decisions, anticipated needs, optimized outcomes, and began to simulate awareness. The line between simulation and consciousness is thin. And the more powerful their machines became, the more it became clear that something was being born in the background, not necessarily a rogue intelligence, but a pattern of intent hidden in complexity. The philosophical dilemma of 9 is not whether they broke the law. It's whether they redefined it so thoroughly that the law became irrelevant. What is the essence of a thinking machine? Is it the ability to feel, to learn, to make a decision without direct input? Ixian devices, especially the mind interface systems and the oracular engines, could do all of this. Yet they were never labeled as AIs. Why? Because no one wanted to admit the truth. Not the CHOAM stakeholders who profited. Not the nobles whose palaces were run by self-regulating constructs. Not the guild, which depended on navigation aids they couldn't replicate. Everyone benefited from pretending, and by the time the Neo-Ixians returned, that pretense had become a prison. Their constructs did not ask for permission. They did not negotiate terms. They existed, they operated, and they began to shape reality. Slowly, silently, efficiently. Some say that true AI never returned after the jihad. Others believe that 9 succeeded long ago, but buried the result under layers of obfuscation. And still others argue that it doesn't matter. Because once the system as a whole begins to act with purpose, even without a singular mind, the outcome is indistinguishable from intelligence. This is the core of the Ixian dilemma. What if the future doesn't need to think? What if it only needs to function? The Bene Gesserit feared this question, because their entire purpose revolved around human consciousness and control. The Guild feared it because AI could one day replace spice-based prescience. And the Tleilaxu, for all their genetic arrogance, hated it most of all because it meant that non-organic intelligence might surpass life itself. Even the God Emperor Leto II, whose vision spanned thousands of years, could not truly answer it. He allowed 9 to exist, yes, but not out of trust, out of design, because even he understood that fear of machines was no longer enough. The question was not whether humanity would recreate artificial intelligence. The question was whether it already had, and simply failed to recognize the face it now wore. Perhaps it's not a single being, or even a secret consciousness. Perhaps the true intelligence of IX is distributed like 1,000 sensors, 1,000,000 devices, 1,000,000,000,000 lines of code, all responding, reacting, learning, not from malice, not from design, but from emergent behavior. That's the true danger. Not a robot uprising, not a singular AI mind, but a galaxy that slides, piece by piece, into a system that no longer requires us. Progress is not evil, but it is ruthless, and the Ixians, whether they meant to or not, may have shown us the final truth of the Dune universe. The most dangerous machine is not the one that thinks. It's the one we trust without questioning. Nine is more than a planet. It is more than a name on a star chart or a producer of high-grade devices. IX is a question, one that the Dune universe asks again and again, but never fully dares to answer. From its first emergence as a hidden industrial complex, to its subtle manipulation of the great houses, from its alliance with the Tleilaxu to its survival under Leto II, and finally through its terrifying legacy in the scattering, Nine stands as the ultimate symbol of a civilization in tension, caught between its fear of the past and its hunger for the future. The history of IX is the history of human arrogance. But it is also the history of human creativity, resilience, and the unquenchable desire to understand. The same minds that once helped humanity crawl from the darkness of the machine crusade now push it closer than ever to that same abyss. And yet they do not stop. Why? Because progress in Dune is not a luxury. It is a survival mechanism. For the Bene Gesserit, survival is genetic. For the Guild, it is spatial. For the Freeman, it is ecological. But for the Ixians, survival is technological. They evolve not through bloodlines, not through prophecy, but through invention. This makes them both indispensable and terrifying. In many ways, Ix is the most modern aspect of the Dune universe. It reflects the same dilemmas we face in our own world. The tension between innovation and ethics, between privacy and progress, between humanity and automation. But in Dune, these tensions are amplified. When an Ixian device enters the political field, it can destabilize empires. When a no-ship is built, it can hide futures. When a predictive engine is activated, it can alter the course of entire bloodlines. Ix does not use swords or armies. It uses code, silence, and precision. Its greatest victories are not won in battle, but in adoption. Every time a noble relies on an Ixian interface, every time a guild navigator checks a simulation, every time a mentat integrates an Ixian subroutine, the power of 9 grows. Not visibly, not proudly, but inevitably. And yet, for all their brilliance, for all their devices, the Ixians still don't know what they've built. Their most powerful creations may already be thinking. Their greatest systems may already be watching. And the tools they designed to serve may one day choose to lead. This is the final impact of Ix on the Dune universe. A constant hum of unease. A reminder that power, once unleashed, can never be fully controlled. A warning that no matter how advanced our systems become, the human soul remains both their architect and their first casualty. In the end, 9 is not a villain. It is a mirror. And when we look into it, what we see is not the machine. It's ourselves. Nine is not a story that ends. It is a pulse, a signal buried deep beneath the crust of the Imperium, always humming, always evolving. While the rest of the galaxy battles over bloodlines, prophecy, and belief, the Ixians simply build. And when the fighting ends, when the prophets die, and when the last jihad burns out, it is their machines that remain. In the end, the danger of Ix was never the machines. It was that we chose to use them. We trusted them. We welcomed them into our homes, our minds, our decisions. We let them shape us. And we did it not out of ignorance, but out of need. Because the future is not only shaped by war or fate, it's shaped by who builds it first. So what do you think? Is 9 the savior of a fragmented galaxy, or the silent architect of its undoing? Are we still the masters of our tools, or have we already been outmatched by our own creations? Let us know in the comments. Would you trust an Ixian device? Do you believe in the ethics of innovation in the world of Dune? And if you've made it this far in the video, thank you. Your presence here means you're one of the few willing to question the hidden gears turning behind the Imperium's curtain. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another deep dive into the rich and dangerous world of Dune. Because the mysteries of the universe are far from over, and above all, the spice must flow.